Welcome to another episode of Kidon, War Stories on the Cutting Edge of IP Monetization. My name is David L. Cohen. I am the owner of Kidon IP, a consultancy, and David L. Cohen PC, a law firm, where we provide IP monetization services to clients both large and small. Every episode, I interview other subject matter experts and leaders in the wide world of prosecuting, asserting, analyzing, monetizing, and defending intellectual property. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and many more. Today, my guest is Bineet Bhasin. I first met Bineet in 2012 while I was at Vringo and he was at iRunway, and we had an extremely fruitful and fun collaboration. And he's a great straight man. I'll tell you that, that's for sure. But he's also very, very smart. So today, Bineet is not at iRunway technically. He is the Vice President of IP Solutions at UnitedLex. His role at the company includes managing revenue, defining companies' go-to-market strategy for IP solutions. He works in close collaboration with general counsels and chief IP counsels of leading corporations and their outside counsel to help them achieve better outcomes by reducing portfolio costs, generating licensing revenues, and driving the performance of their teams. So welcome, Bineet, to the show. It's great to see you again after all these years.
I know, likewise, David, and thanks for the invitation. This is kind of an honor to be talking to you, given all the work that we have done in the past.
Well, it's my pleasure. And you're definitely one of the stars in my rather large team over the years. And so I guess one of the questions we'll start off with is, we were joking before about the call before we started, but it is true that a lot of the leading lights in your sort of subsector of IP have come from India and have come from IIT, right?
That's
right.
correct.
IIT, which is the Indian Institute of Technology, right?
That's right.
Which is probably one of, if not the leading, South Asian technical university or technical institute of higher learning. Which is, congrats to you got in, congrats to you that you graduated, and congrats to you that you don't look like an old man having graduated. You look quite young and robust. So it definitely, you probably did well there. But the question for you is, how did you end up in IP out of coming as a technical person?
Well, thanks for the question. I think, it makes sense to talk a little bit about the background. I do come from IIT, and that too, the IIT Roorkee, which is the oldest technical institution in Asia. I think we just celebrated 175 years.
Oh, wow.
And so the journey started about 15 years ago when I was in the final year of college. I'd say that it was not a very informed choice at that time, and was mostly driven by a vague interest in doing something different from the masses. So I did my engineering at IIT, and as you know, most IITians back then migrated to the US for higher studies or a job in the Silicon Valley. They were all into software programming. I was okay at programming, but back then I wanted to be more of a generalist rather than an expert.
Right.
So among all the software companies floating at the campus came this small consulting firm called iRunway. No one had heard of it. They were less than a year old. The finances were unknown. No one knew how they're going to do in the market. And they said they specialized in providing technology consulting to law firms, including patent litigations. So it was an opportunity to work on a different technology. It sounded cool enough to me. The founders did a pretty good job during the placement campus fair. And so I took a leap of faith and started my journey in the IP world with them.
That's cool. And, iRunway, for those listeners who don't know, was one of the larger Indian technology consulting companies, especially in the States eventually. I know that we were a big client of them, and so was Ericsson and McCool Smith and a number of other leading lights in the IP monetization game. And you guys developed a very large footprint, including a number of reports over the years that you've issued. But iRunway as it was doesn't exist anymore, although I understand that it sort of does. And so maybe tell us a little bit about how iRunway and yourself, separately or together, got to where you are today.
Sure. It was a fun evolution. And so my iRunway journey, I think it lasted for a good decade or so. And it was mostly focused on providing transactional services related to patents to our clients. This included all things, the usual suspects: patent monetization, litigation support, searches, analytics, landscapes, all types of the usual IP stuff that you expect from a consulting firm. Now, patent monetization and litigation was probably the biggest piece of our business, where our teams would work with law firms during litigations to provide infringement and invalidity support. Our teams would review source code, reverse engineer products to unearth critical evidence to support the case. So over time, what happened after working with hundreds of clients on hundreds of cases, our team, our subject matter experts, got a very good handle on the overall IP landscape that goes beyond technology. And this is when I think our team started treading into the strategy zone. For example, you mentioned Vringo when we worked together. Our team got splendid experience and exposure thanks to you.
I made you guys come and sit in our office, if I recall
I
correctly.
know for we spent a lot of time at your offices working together on different things, on calls, working with law firms all across the world, right? So the international patent litigation, that was our entry into that zone. How things work in Europe, in Asia, in South America, what are the pros and cons of each jurisdiction. I still remember to date how we dealt with Netherlands and cases in Germany and Romania and Brazil and what South Africa.
Yeah.
So that sort of gave our team a good deal of exposure. And this is just on the monetization side. Similar things, similar evolution was happening on the portfolio development side: acquisitions, how to build a defensive portfolio for companies, how do you smartly maintain your patents. So with time, our team evolved from being technology experts to strategic patent experts. And this happened very organically over the years. So what happened when we got acquired by UnitedLex in 2013, that already had a great team of advisors, lawyers, engineers on litigation, contracting, compliance side, we got the necessary boost to evolve as strategic IP consultants and go beyond what we used to do. And if you think about it, patents at the heart of it, at the core, are intangible assets. They are connected with business. They are not separated from business like some companies or chief IP counsels like to think. And if a business has to grow their revenue, they have to improve their sales. They have to go into new geographies. You would go and hire a McKinsey or BCG. But if you really think about it today, I can't think of any company where you would go and say, hey, how do I leverage my IP in a wholesome fashion to drive my business better, to manage my costs better, to grow my revenue, to get my performance up, improve the morale of my team, maybe drive an innovation centric culture. So that's the foundation on which UnitedLex IP Solutions is built, in terms of how do you value your portfolio, what's their portfolio ROI, return on investment. And if people are not thinking about it, our message to the market is it's high time you do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. So what aspect of IP do you use, or what aspects of IP do you use to help sort of drive that consulting? For me, it always seems that an underappreciated aspect of patents, for example, is that yes, they disclose in theory um, specific solutions to specific problems and technology that the inventor thought, but in the aggregate, they really provide a lot of information about where people's heads are at with respect to innovation, with respect to jurisdictions worth patenting in, with respect to problems worth even solving, and perhaps even solutions, off the shelf solutions to categories of problems that people use. And I haven't seen that kind of stuff mined in any systematic way. And I'm curious, like what aspects of IP do you sort of see are useful to these big goals that you have as a IP consultant?
Sure. So I think that's a fair point, and I think you rightly said we haven't seen these different pieces come together as a solution in the market. You got, okay, you want to get infringement assessment done, you hire a firm and you do that. You want to understand how your portfolio compares with others, you do a landscape study and stuff like that. But that's just a small piece of it. You need to put all this IP information and data in context of the overall bigger, larger business perspective. What's your business goal, and how can you help the business drive that further using IP? So I think
Mm,
one of the key terms that we focus on is patent ROI, right? Any GC or chief IP counsel, when they come to speak with us, we start there. What's your ROI on your portfolio? And we focus on patents. So, and we have heard these terms over the year, right? This is not new to you. You might have heard it several times. We've practiced it. We've tried to work on it, but it still didn't get the necessary attention that I think it should. And we've started seeing a change in that in the market now. We all know patents are intangible assets. Companies are spending tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in building and maintaining their portfolios. Now it's only logical for business leadership to start asking the GCs and other legal teams about the return on this huge investment. And there are companies that hold tens of thousands of patents worldwide, spending $100 million plus on filing and maintenance and internal team costs, yet they hardly think about the returns that this massive IP asset can bring to the business. They keep filing patents at times to maintain a portfolio size equivalent to their competitor, and competitor does the same, and the end
right.
result is you've got 20, 30,000 patents without thinking about how the you're more focused on quantity rather than quality, which I think is a problem. That's foolish. So you're not effectively in patent litigation wars, but you are in patent build wars, uh,
Right.
so to speak. And this is especially true for non-high tech industries. Energy companies, automotive companies, retail companies, they've got massive portfolios. They have not done a thing about it. Or maybe, maybe I shouldn't sound so condescending, but they have done very little about it. So now ROI in itself is a topic for another day. I think there are a lot of different moving parts there, but there are, I think, four or five value levers that each chief IP counsel, general counsel should think about when they're thinking of their patent portfolio. Number one is the obvious one: licensing revenue. Are you actually going into the market and getting licensing revenue generated off your patents? The second one is defensive value of the portfolio, and people have talked about it. Okay, we just build our portfolio from defensive perspective, but they have never put an effort to put a number to it.
Well, they probably haven't. Many of them haven't even put an effort to figure out what that actually means,
That's
because
true.
there's this space between getting a patent that covers what you've invented
Hmm.
and figuring out whether what you've invented is incorporated into your products,
Right.
and then figuring out whether that the resultant patent is defensible in litigation, whatever. But more importantly, will provide you the necessary leverage in a litigation or a cross licensing exercise to minimize risk and payment from any counterparty that comes and sues you. And very few people have done that kind of analysis.
Correct. That's absolutely right. And people, there are industries, let's say energy or retail. There are no patent litigations ongoing there. There is probably very limited threat that it might happen. So you have to consider those things. You have to look at data. You have to feed the data into a technology engine and come up with quantifiable numbers, right? Come up with dollar figures and say, here's the cost of my portfolio, here are the different benefits that I'm deriving out of it. So here's my ROI, and then compare that ROI with your closest competitors and see how are you doing. I,
Right.
I think that's the kind of thing that's missing in the market. Other examples would be market dominance, right? Which is the reason why patents came into being. You want to, prohibit your competition from using your technology, and that has a value associated with it as well. How much market share have you gained because of this invention? But there is nothing in the market as of today which is giving you a number associated with that. So that's something where UnitedLex team is currently focused in building a model and an engine. We already have tons of data. We continue to build on that repository of data, and eventually, talking to the leaders at different companies and telling them, here's your patent ROI, here's how you can improve it, and then especially explaining how would you use technology and data to really drive value.
No, I think that's very fascinating, and I want to come back to that. But a couple of things. So there's like another aspect of patents that is sort of not necessarily purely offensive, as like creating a licensing vertical. would include, I think, marketing. And that's a very broad term, but a lot of that is making your employees feel good. Like what my line is, that patent's worth making. That patent is only worth showing your grandma to make her feel proud of you, or something like that. But there is an aspect to that. But also, I'm sure you've seen how companies like Apple make a tremendous amount of PR hay out of selected releases of patents out there that everyone picks up and the press picks up, and it creates a lot of buzz about that. So there is an aspect to that, and that's a little touchier to sort of not to monetize, but to provide a precise ROI. But I'm curious if you had that, and then even more sort of ambiguous. Well, maybe I'll stop there because I want to get to trade secrets in a second, which is directly related to the challenge there.
Sure.
Have you ever thought about that aspect of how do you put a figure?
Yes, we have. And so when I was talking about 4 or 5 different value levers, brand is an important lever in that ecosystem, right? You have patents, and traditionally a lot of companies have filed patents because they thought that it's giving them a reputation in the market. But the reputation doesn't come passively, right? You need to make active efforts, like you said, Apple has done, to really promote it and push it in the market, to push yourself as an innovative company, which is different from your competition.
Right.
You have amassed all these patents, you have a huge patent portfolio, and there are some seminal assets that you probably have. Just market it. And I think we have done some good we have seen some good examples of this culture in the retail sector. Companies like Colgate, right? They do some patent-centric marketing.
Yes.
They would talk about, hey, we have developed a sustainable toothpaste enclosure, which is recyclable.
Right. And yeah.
Great job at that. So, and that's just one example. If you have thousands and thousands of patents, there would be so many other examples that you can find in your portfolio and then highlight. And I'm sure the marketing teams would be more than happy to pick it up.
Yeah, and probably the marketing boost that you get from using the word patented, will more than cover the costs of prosecution and maintenance.
Correct.
For a large number of patents, and so you're sort of getting direct ROI there.
Correct.
But moving to the trade secret thing, I found that because you may have seen I've tried to delve a little bit into trade secrets. It's sort of a cutting edge thing, and we can talk about how the failures in the American patent system with certain categories of technology are leading to a growth in trade secrets, but also there's the changing nature of technology. But I found that it's very hard to talk about trade secrets for many reasons, and especially because trade secrets are they're non-registered. You don't have to register them. Very broad and based. And when you're dealing with transactions, what I've found ever since I've been in the space for some 25 years or so, is that a patent or a small group of patents tend to act sort of as a proxy or something like that for all the incoherent know-how and trade secrets and whatnot that a company has. Because, like a trade secret, like a license, a technology license for all this stuff will include a few patents in there, because a patent is a patent. It's the thing that but trade secrets is a mess to define. You may not want to define it for all different kinds of reasons. And so for purposes of valuation in M&A, or for purposes of sort of technology transfer in a licensing arrangement, you have these patents acting well above and beyond their sort of narrow focus of what you can do within the litigation. And I'm sort of curious, because I've never seen anyone ever talk about this in anything other than the level we're talking about it now. If you've sort of developed some sort of way to think about it and put a value on these assets.
That's a good point. So the short answer is no. We haven't really delved into trade secrets per se, because as you rightly said, that's a tougher ask. And the reason is that for you to really start putting a value, you need to know what it is.
Right.
And more often than not, companies themselves don't know what their trade secrets are. And I'm sure you would have experienced that, right? They would have to ask person X would have to ask person Y, and no one would have a concrete answer. Plus, proving trade secret in a court of law, which is again your expertise, is much harder than proving any other form of IP, right? You
Right,
have
right,
to show clear boundaries around it and say this is a trade secret because we did X, Y, and Z.
right,
Uh, Now, having said that, that is at the moment a very interesting problem statement to which a solution doesn't exist. You can do so much. You can do certain things with patents. You can do things with copyrights, but when it comes to trade secrets, I think there is a need in the market, and these are just my high-level thoughts, to build a system that can ingest data from the company in a protective way so that they can keep it secure and at least make sure that the trade secrets are getting captured in some form or shape. And once we start having that data, then you need to connect it with all the other value levers that we were talking about. How can
right.
you build a brand? How is it maybe driving some revenue if you license it? But I don't know if you can possibly license it without revealing it, and other things, right? So I think it's about time that that kind of thing needs to work upon. And I know that you've been working on trade secret for a while, and you got some interesting partners in that space as well.
Yeah, no, totally. We've been focusing on the metadata around trade secrets, figurative and literal. Who made it, where it's made, what contracts relate to it, and coming up with ways to sort of describe it without necessarily giving too much of it away. And what that allows you to do is capture information about it, and catalog it, and organize it more. But it's still a lot of work necessarily,
It
for
is.
big multinationals, and challenging. And a lot of companies do it, and I guess that's my point, and part of the reason why they probably did this. A lot of companies use patents as sort of a shorthand, like we have technology and I don't know making widgets, and we have a patent on making widgets, but there's all this other stuff um, around there, and that'll be sort of we're going to license the patent and the know-how and and the trade secrets, and the patents sort of act as a flag for this broader phenomenon stuff around it that's not covered in the patent.
Yeah, that is true. And I think it's important for us to realize that it's probably trade secrets is step two or step three in this evolution of the technology and the
Yep.
product and the data form, because the easier things to conquer right now for geeks in the Silicon Valley who are working on AI and ML is to figure out how do they crack the code for patents, right? That's
Yes.
the bigger piece of the puzzle. And once
Yes.
I figure out a model to crack that, then you start thinking about, okay, what can I do about copyrights and trade secrets and I don't know, geographical indicators if there's any value there anymore.
No, totally, 100% right, 100% right. Well, I was curious if you have a trade secret about that, you've done very well and taken reasonable measures to not disclose it. But moving along, but I think we did talk. We kept talking about the data, and I think I mentioned at the top of our conversation about how you can use data to sort of provide various pieces of information about your industry, your company. And I'm curious, sort of how you've been using data. How can companies use technology and data? We all know the easy answers, but I'm curious as sort of a holistic approach to using the technology and data to make for better decision making on all aspects of things that get touched by IP.
Yeah. No, so I think it's best to talk about this in terms of some examples. I strongly believe that the next innovation in IP management is going to occur in form of technology, and I think we all believe that for a while now. And technology by itself means little, right? It needs to be fed with data to provide deep insights.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at the IP life cycle, starting with the patent build to patent maintenance to patent monetization, at each stage, IP lawyers and business heads can actually use technology and data to make better decisions. If we talk about patent development or build, companies, like we talked about it, companies have been filing patents left and right based on years old policies, right? They've been just filing for the heck of filing sometimes and without having a goal in place. And when they do that, there are three main questions to consider, right? The number one question is what to file,
Right.
number two, where to file, and number three, how to file. And I believe all three things can be supported in a very nice fashion by using some technology and data. When you think about what to file and where to file, you need to think about what where your business is headed, what are your critical products, what the competition is doing, where are they headed, are they starting to talk about automotive is a good example of that. All these companies, Ford, General Motors, Toyota, they had been filing legacy assets, which we call legacy now, engines, emissions, transmission for ages, and Tesla came in there and started the EV trend. Now, did Ford, GM, and other companies take account of that back then and say, okay, this is where the industry is headed. Autonomous driving is where the industry is headed, and let me try and tailor my filing strategy, help guide R&D towards it, and maybe stop filing as many legacy assets as I had been filing in the past.
Right.
Probably not to the extent they should have done it.
Right.
So they need to use this data. They need to collect this data and take it into account when they decide what should they file. Does it even
Yeah.
make sense?
Have you? Because I know we did it at Vringo. You may not remember. I'm not sure we used you guys, but at Vringo we used that data for a few more steps up on the value chain, or a few more steps back. I don't know how you want to, whatever, how you want to use the metaphor, to sort of, we picked a technology space and we used the data to figure out both the current problems that are being tackled, the previously assessed attempted solutions,
Yeah.
some off-the-shelf ideas that people have been using, and then we assembled a team of innovators, in-house and outside, and sort of created a structured innovation process using the data. And ultimately, we were moderately successful in that. For less than $500,000, much less actually,
Correct.
we were able to get some 25 patents, 5 prototypes. The management pulled the plug on the prototypes, but ultimately we sold the assets for over $1.5 million. I think we tripled or quadrupled our money in 2 years. Now we got lucky for any number of reasons that we could, we got smart. We sort of glommed onto Bitcoin in the early days, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm curious if you've had any experience of taking all this data that you're collecting about technology development and using it for technology development.
Well, yes, we have. And again, we have to talk about it in terms of the stage of IP lifecycle, right? Because the data and the technology that you would use at each step of the process is different. What you would use
Right.
for patent portfolio development is way different than what you would use for patent harvesting, right? Or monetization for that
Right.
matter. One good example is related to patent maintenance. Maybe we can talk about that. So um, let's say you are a company, a big defense company or aerospace company. You got 20,000 plus assets, and you, of course, like every other company, you would let go of certain patents every year because they are not relevant. Now, traditionally, the way these companies do it is by using their in-house team, maybe referencing to a couple of retired professors, and very occasionally hiring an outside counsel or a firm like ours to
Right.
get data and inputs and insights. Now, so we did some study, and what we found was if you actually compare the average lapse rates of certain companies over the last 5 years and compare it with their competitors, we found great differences. There's one company which is the outlier that's doing great. That's very smart about letting patents go, and the lapse rate is at 15, 20, 25%, and they're saving tons of money by doing it. The other company has just not really thought about doing things differently. They're doing it the way it has been done historically. So they're lapsing their patents at 5 to 8%. And they own.
Or perhaps worse than that, and I speak from personal experience, I will not mention names, but they could be inferred, where they keep it as it has been done. There's a financial hiccup in the road of the company. There's a panic. They let a whole host, and it goes up to 40% lapse.
Mm.
And then 2 or 3 years later, when they need them in litigation, there's a lot of buyer's remorse. But too bad.
Correct. Exactly. And very few people actually think of patent divestment when they're thinking of patent.
Or patent divestment, yeah.
Right? They don't think about it. They would just let assets
Didn't
go.
we do a project at one point in time where a big European company was changing its direction technologically, and they had a whole huge portfolio that they just weren't going to need anymore because they were dumping that operating business? and we had a whole bunch of assets. I think it was with you guys. We went through a portfolio, but yeah, no, there's not too many companies that think like that.
Correct, correct. And I think all the big companies that are letting go of these assets, which, if you think about even 5%, 10% of a big portfolio, that turns out in thousands that you're letting go every year, considering all the family members. If you start thinking divestment, you can start generating revenue at the same time saving costs. So what we try to do is take a data-driven approach. We would consider the kind of assets that your competition has been lapsing uh, over the past 3 to 5 years. We would consider the patents that you have lapsed over the last 3 to 5 years. And then we have built an AI engine in house, which allows us to quickly group patents similar to what has been lapsed in your market, which gives us a good sense of where the industry is headed, what type of technologies are not valuable anymore, and this engine actually works at the claim level. So what you would see as an output is, okay, some expert told you 2 years ago this patent is not good, the claims are not good, let it go. And you have maybe 100 other patents which are very similar to this one patent that you've already lapsed. So just use the technology, press a button, you would get a quick list of these 100 assets. And then think about, you can do an SME review on top of that, which would be more efficient for you to decide whether you want to keep these assets or not. So
Right, and you could possibly, and I'm just thinking on a higher level here, sort of what you were talking about, the investment. I imagine, I actually know this from a friend of mine who did this in the telecom space. 2G, who cares about? Well, who cares in the Western Europe? Again,
yeah,
we're talking around 6 or 7 years ago, but in Africa and other certain third world countries, with no disrespect intended, 2G is still really significant. And for peanuts, they were able to acquire this portfolio. And now, yeah, the divesting company didn't really make too much money,
mhm,
but they've seeded a potential large partner with a large portfolio in a country where they wouldn't otherwise be operating.
correct, correct. And I think that's one of the things, right? A lot of people, when they think about IP, they restrict themselves to US or Europe. They do not take, and this is, I think, one of your strong points, that you bring in this exposure of international law. You need to think all around the world, at least where IP is respected.
Yeah.
Um, and I think by doing that, you would definitely increase the value of your portfolio, just by doing certain few simple things, which could be achieved within a matter of 1 to 2 months. So I think it's important to have discussions around these topics every now and then, and particularly when the IP team is setting the budget and goals for the year. You need to take a hard look every year on these things. Use data, use technology. You don't have to hire an outside firm if you have those capabilities in house, but you need to start thinking how to better manage your portfolio.
No, totally. I mean, and you may not have to hire an outside firm very for long term, but just having sometimes you need a consultant to like knock you up and show you what you need to do,
Correct.
and that's also so. And I'd love to catch off, but maybe that's a topic for another time. A little bit about your in-house AI engine. I've dabbled in that space, and I'd love to chat. That's a whole other sort of kettle of fish about technological stuff. We don't have that much time,
Yeah.
but AI is. I find one of the challenges, and maybe that's where UnitedLex has a leg up. Anything software related falls into the zeroth rule of all software, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very, very, very important to have good stuff to come in and to train your engine properly. Otherwise, you know,
That's true. That's true. And also another thing is that there are a lot of companies that claim they have got these brilliant AI solutions that would just do everything, and you don't need a subject matter expert or a
yeah,
lawyer anymore. That's just gimmickry. That's just marketing gimmicks.
of
We
course,
have evaluated a lot of products out there, and there are some really good ones. And in fact, the ones that we build are also based on the principles of getting us to a stage where we are making the subjective review efficient. But
yeah.
there's still more work to be done in the patent world, at least, where you get to a product which would sort of alleviate the need of an expert.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't think we're there. I think you're 100% correct the way you characterized it, which is that you can have the best tool out there, but someone still needs to understand what the output means. It could be perfectly cognizant, perfectly wonderful output. You need to know what it means. Then you need someone who might be someone else, frankly, to
yeah,
understand what to do with that information.
correct. And not just that, even in terms of the output accuracy, we're not there yet. I think there are tools.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not even going there. I'm not even going there. I mean, but assuming the output accuracy is at
Correct.
a high enough level, you still need to understand what it means, let alone what to do about it. And those are skill sets that are very far from being automated, I think.
Yep.
So let's go to the fun stuff. So we've done a lot of work. I've done personally a lot of work in patent monetization. Together we have, and you have as well. So are you still doing patent monetization? And by any definition of the term, and can you share some of your recent successes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are still very much in patent monetization business. The perspectives have changed a little, though, right? When we're working for a corporation, we are doing several things. Like portfolio mining gives rise to multiple outputs, monetization being one of them. So it has become, a spoke in the wheel as opposed to the wheel itself that used to be
Right.
previously. But I can, maybe share a couple of success stories, recent success stories. So
Sure.
the first one that comes to mind is Altaba, which is the formerly known as Yahoo,
Right.
and
Yahoo.
I know. Um, well, so the after the business was sold to Verizon, the Altaba board had this problem statement. They have 2,000 assets and they don't know what to do with it, but they
Right.
just don't want to dump it because that would be not fair to the shareholders. So the president of the group reached out to us and said, "Hey, this is what I have. I hired a firm before you, and they gave me a 1 billion plus valuation on this portfolio, and this is 2018-19 when Alice had a strong foothold. So the market just is shitting all over this valuation, and I'm not going anywhere. So what can you do to help?" So I think that was an interesting problem statement, and also I think realization how best can we generate value on software assets given the Alice problem that companies
Right.
had been facing. So we did almost everything for them from soup to nuts, evaluating the portfolio, finding the value nuggets, identifying industry verticals because every company is an internet company these days. So right,
Right.
we prioritize, and of course making claim charts and valuation reports and stuff like that. But the most interesting part that we did for them was going on the road almost everywhere. So we were every other week traveling to Silicon Valley, where we would help them make a business case in front of these defensive folks from big corporations who say that, hey, your portfolio is worth $0, and we had to show it to them one by one, prove how there is value. It's Yahoo. They've got
Mhm.
2,000 assets. There's got a great pedigree, and you need to see beyond the Alice stuff, which of course would apply to a bunch of patents, but it doesn't apply to the whole bunch.
Right.
And so we were pretty successful doing that program with them. In less than 2 years, I believe we generated $100 million plus for them on the portfolio. And then the portfolio, I believe, was eventually sold off to Acacia, who right now is working on the
Yes.
long tail on
Right.
that portfolio.
That's cool.
So that
So did you say 100 million plus? You stopped for a minute. I wasn't sure if Yahoo was trying to mute you or something.
no, that's not. So I think I believe there was more that came from it, but the number that at least we are entitled to disclose in public is that number. So
That's still very much a
sure,
lot of value.
it's a great number, and I know that there's a long tail, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, every company is an internet company, so I'm pretty sure Acacia would have, they would have broke even the cost of the portfolio.
That's that's sort of their specialty. You don't want to get involved in that.
I know. So that was an interesting case. And the other example I may want to highlight is more specific to corporations. We've been working with one of the largest automotive companies uh,
Hmm.
over the last 2 years, and their general counsel had a very specific problem. Here's my portfolio. I'm spending so much on this. I want to generate revenue. I'm spending more than what I'm making, and help me get to that stage. And I think he had a constraint, which I think almost every big corporation will probably have that constraint. I can't go against my competition. So don't tell me you can license it to XYZ who's in direct competition with me. So what we did for them was to go on a different strategy, identify adjacent markets
Right.
where they can monetize their portfolio, right? So
Makes a lot of sense.
technology is not just restricted to automotives. You've got mining, marine, construction, generator companies. Everyone's using engines and emissions technology.
Right.
For that matter, the craziest example we had was of that of a theme park.
Of the what?
Theme parks, Disney.
Theme
Or
parks. How hilarious.
I know. So that was funny, but yet there was
Wait,
value in
so
it.
you're trying to, so it's your fault that Mickey Mouse is so expensive?
Well, a little bit. You can blame us for that. No, jokes aside, I think that was very interesting exercise, and that's still ongoing, and hopefully would continue in the near future. But the similar philosophy, would apply to any other traditional company, right? The industries are getting right, wireless communication is in cars and almost every other industry.
I remember with wireless, we were looking at agriculture.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're right. Agriculture, AGCO was another case. And now I think with IoT and the way technology is headed, everything is probably going to become one big technology hub.
Yeah, no, it's a very and complicated technology stack, and I'm sure we can argue about that over for the cows come up. But this has been great, Benny. First of all, it was great to see you again after
Likewise.
after it's been too long, and so thank you for coming. And it sounds like you're still doing fascinating work. And so, if how can our viewers get in touch with you? What's the easiest way?
Sure. So if they want to learn more about our business, they can go to www.unitedlex.com. That's our website, has a ton of great stuff. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We publish thought pieces almost every week. And if you have a specific case in mind, you want to talk about it, you can reach out to me over email at bineet.bhasin@unitedlex.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Benita. It's been fun and fascinating, and let's keep in touch. But thank you for the time being.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for having me, David. It was fun 30, 40 minutes. I don't know. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Likewise.